That was not very enthusiastic. Are you having a good time? Much better. It's not quite around the world in 80 days, it's 21 days. So thank you, Family Nurturing Center, for putting on yet another great event. We are thrilled that you've chosen your Friday night to spend with us. I'm Susan Johnson. I'll be kind of guiding you, your tour guide, a little bit through the evening. Just a few housekeeping. I want to thank Gesture for coming in and helping us with the silent auction with the mobile bidding. If you do not have a cell phone or mobile device that allows you to bid, or you want to bid with them, they are wearing gray shirts. If you're in the room, Gesture, go ahead and raise your hand. They will be your bidding buddies. I see one over here. I see one over here with their iPads. They will be your bidding buddies this evening. So if you need to place a bid and you don't have your device with you, they will help you out with that. So thank you very much to Gesture. Everything is by bidder number. With the silent auction, there is no paper, so everything is electronic, so that is wonderful this year. We do have several food stations set up around the room, around the globe. Each food station is a different country. So we have Mediterranean, there's Mexican, there's American, so please make sure that you check out each country, the German section as well, for the different foods. At the 3 bars, there are also specialty drinks. So each bar has a different specialty drink. So make sure that you check out all 3 specialty drinks as well. So at that time, I would like to invite Family Nurturing Center's Executive Director, Ms. Jenn Herms, to the podium.
Good evening. Thank you all for coming to this party with a purpose, and that purpose is child abuse prevention and treatment services. Each year, Family Nurturing Center serves over 30,000 children and families through a whole range of education, prevention, and treatment programs in Northern Kentucky and in Cincinnati. And to bring that purpose to life tonight, we have Jeff Thomas with us. Jeff has spent most of his life doing what he loves, telling stories and talking to fascinating people. Born and raised in Boston, Jeff's broadcasting career took him zigzagging between the East Coast, West Coast, and Gulf Coast before finally settling down in the river town that ultimately won his heart. For the past 13 years, Jeff has been the male half of the popular Jeff and Jenn morning show, heard weekdays in Q102. When Jeff isn't waking up tri-staters, he's either volunteering for one of his favorite charities, planning his next world travel adventure, or exploring Cincinnati's diverse dining scene. Jeff is with us tonight to share his personal story. Please welcome him.
Does anybody need a second date update before we get started? A lot of people ask me how I got into the business of radio. I grew up in a household that always had the radio on. It was always in the background. It didn't matter if we were at home or in the car. It's kind of part of the soundtrack of my life. My earliest memory, back before radios had digital displays, you know, like how at night you'd really see the backlight behind the radio dial? When I was a toddler, I would look inside, I would peer inside, hoping to catch a glimpse of the tiny people that I was convinced were living inside of that box. My mother tells me that as soon as I was old enough to walk and talk, that I would steal her hairbrush or a magic marker or anything that remotely resembled a microphone. And instead of marking up the walls like most toddlers, I was holding it like a microphone and mimicking everything that I heard on the radio. I was giving traffic reports when I was 3. I've always been attracted to the medium of radio. I was fascinated by how it worked. And just as I got older and I gained an understanding of it, it just seemed like a fun way to make a living. My hometown's high school, lucky for me, living just outside of Boston, we had a small 10-watt educational high school radio station. It was completely student-run. There was one faculty advisor. He was the AV department head, so I guess he won that by default. And every year, the radio station would hold a fundraiser that was part of our FCC requirement, as we couldn't just broadcast, we had to be a public service. And so we would hold a fundraiser every year for a local charity by giving free airtime to anyone who donated money. So when I was in the 4th grade, I convinced my stepfather to lend me $5 so that I could go to the radio station and talk on the radio. And so the next thing I know, I'm at the high school, sitting in a little booth with a pair of headphones on, reading Peter Cottontail live on the air. And at that age, that was the biggest moment of my life. And the faculty advisor is standing off to the side, he's watching me from nearby, and he could see how excited I was to be there, and the man turned to my stepfather and he said, listen, he's not old enough for his own time slot. That's reserved for high schoolers, but he's welcome to hang out here anytime after school if he wants. He can help out the bigger kids. So every day, as soon as my homework was finished, I would run to the high school and I would make a pest of myself at the radio station. I would offer to put the records away, I would alphabetize the 45s, I would answer the request line, I would take out the trash, I would make a food run for the DJ that was on the radio, you name it. I just wanted to be there, I just wanted to be a part of it. And most of the older high school kids, they tolerated me, but I think they enjoyed the novelty of having a mascot around, and that was me. Pauline Smith was a senior working at the radio station, and she offered to help me study for my FCC broadcaster's license. Back in the 70s, it was a requirement. You had to have an FCC broadcaster's license in order to operate a transmitter. So the station's faculty advisor, he made a deal with me. He told me that if I studied hard, passed the test, and got my FCC broadcaster's license, he would make an exception to the rules and he would let me co-host a 1-hour show once a week after school, even though the rules limited access to high school kids. Now, I was never more excited to study anything in my life. You gotta keep in mind here, I was 9. And I was struggling with a learning disability, yet somehow I managed to learn everything there was to know about obscenity laws, what you could and could not say on the radio, how to calculate the station's transmitter power, the rules and procedures of the emergency broadcast system, even what to do if, heaven forbid, the lights on the tower went out. And on October 25th of 1977, before I turned 10, I aced that test and I got my 3rd class FCC broadcaster's license. Meanwhile, life at home was tough. My father had abandoned us years earlier, and my mother's second husband was an abusive alcoholic. So the radio station, for me, it provided an escape, and it was also a way for me to connect with people. And it was also the first thing that I ever excelled at, and that brought me indescribable joy. And one day, the radio station's faculty advisor, he asked me to go for a ride with him. He was the AV department head, so it was not unusual for him to take a kid with him to run film projectors or sound equipment from one building to the other. And it also wasn't uncommon for him to maybe make a food run or buy pizza for the kids that were working at the station late during evening hours. And strangely, when I look back, I cannot believe that it was not unusual for some of the boys working at the radio station to go on ski weekends with him and stay at his cabin in New Hampshire. And I can only assume that every one of these kids' parents probably thought this man was the perfect big brother, the perfect mentor for their sons. So when he asked me to run an errand with him, I felt flattered that he would ask me out of all the other kids, because for me, that meant I was going to get one-on-one time with the coach. And that was the first day I became a victim of sexual abuse. I'm going to share a statistic with you. 80% of sexual abuse happens in isolated one-on-one situations. And for me, it was always in his car. Here's another statistic. 90% of children who are sexually abused are done so by someone they know or trust. This was a man that I admired. This was a man that I trusted. This was also a man who had immense power over me because he could take away the very thing that mattered to me the most. And did I mention that sexual abusers give special gifts to draw children to them? Well, the gift that he tempted me with was the chance to do the one thing that I was actually good at. To be a part of a team, approval, acceptance, friends. And for a socially awkward kid, especially a socially awkward kid who didn't really excel at anything else, the prospect of losing those things terrified me. So with every muscle in my body clenched tight, I closed my eyes and I pretended I was somewhere else. And after it happened, I felt paralyzed. I felt numb. I felt like my soul had left my body. I felt filthy. I felt violated. I was afraid to tell anyone what happened to me because I was embarrassed and I was ashamed and I was afraid that people wouldn't believe me, or worse, they would somehow think that I had invited or asked for his advances. I was terrified I was going to lose everything that mattered to me. I was afraid that my mother would be mad at me. So I convinced myself that it didn't actually happen. And I even managed to kind of reprogram my brain that same way the second time he molested me, and the time after that, and the time after that. So over time, as you get older and your defense mechanism develops, I learned how to dodge and weave. I became an expert at avoidance. I would set my volunteer hours at the radio station during times that I knew that he wouldn't be there. I learned how to fly under the radar. I guess I learned how to disappear. And eventually he lost interest in me, but by that time years had passed and I was a pretty screwed up kid. Never told a soul about what happened to me, but it didn't matter because I was convinced that everyone knew. Felt like I had this big tattoo on my forehead that marked me as someone filthy. Or that marked me as someone deserving of abuse. So before long, I became increasingly self-conscious and even more socially awkward than I was before. I was withdrawn, I was angry, I was racked with guilt. And I often think about how the years of that inner turmoil following what happened may have been different had someone offered me the kind of resources that the Family Nurturing Center offers, you know? Because with my adult brain, I'm 48 years old, and I intellectually understand that I was a victim of sexual abuse, but many of us who are survivors of abuse, we battle demons of self-hatred that come from the misguided belief that the abuse was somehow our fault. And so we feel ashamed. And what do we do when we feel shame? We silence ourselves. We tell no one. And what does that do? It gives power to the perpetrators. And that's why I'm sharing the story with you here tonight. I know it's ugly and I know it's uncomfortable to listen to, and believe me, talking about this publicly ain't a party either. But I'm sharing my story with you not to get you to feel sorry for me, but to change the way society reacts and responds to child sexual abuse. There are real horror stories behind the statistics that I shared with you tonight. And I'll tell you what, the Family Nurturing Center, they are the most well-equipped arsenal we've got. They're on the front lines, providing the necessary resources that offer opportunities for healing and forgiveness, not so that we can forget what happened to us, but for the chance to feel whole again and stop the cycle from repeating itself. But we can't do this by ourselves. We can't do it alone. We gotta have your support. And this is the good news. The good news is everyone can be a part of the change to end the cycle of child abuse. But the sobering news is that everyone has to be a part of the change to end this cycle of child abuse. And that's a big job. This job is too big for the small handful of people, God bless them, that have dedicated their lives to healing individuals and their families. It requires all of us. It's the only way we're going to reverse the attitudes. And it's the only way we're going to reverse the statistics. That's why we're here tonight, right? That's why we all came. It comes down to you and me. Right here, right now. Let's do this tonight. That's all I got. Thanks.